think you both know them, so I'm not going to go through a real formal introduction. But Katie McKee is the director of our prize Center for the Study of Southern Culture. It's just a real gem and a crowning jewel for Ole Miss. She is co-editor with Deborah Barker of American Cinema and the Southern Imaginary, which I love that title. She's also published in lots and lots of journals. I won't go through all those, but I do want to tell you her areas of expertise. It's scholarly research in 19th century American literature, the literature of culture of the 19th century U.S. South, writing by women, global South studies, film studies, and humor studies. So she'll bring a lot to the conversation today. So thanks for being here. Anne doesn't need much of an introduction. She was a thriving artist as a young woman, and then she decided to pursue her doctorate, and she became a licensed psychotherapist and a full chaplain, and she did that for 31 years. Then she returned to art, and she went to the New York Studio School. She's had lots of exhibits all over the country. She's a wife and grandmother, and one of the things that she does, and I'm going to let you talk about this in the discussion, but she stamps all of her work, grandmother, wise woman, which I just love, and there's a story behind it. There's also a passage, she has these gems in this book, these bits of wisdom from people from all walks of life, but one of them is from the great doctor and writer Oliver Sacks. She refers to him as a psychiatrist and a healer. And it struck me when I was reading that, many of you know that that's what Anne Strand is. She's a healer. So please welcome our panelists.
This was already on. Hello. So nice of you all to come out. I'm going to first take advantage of what Neil said about the Center for the Study of Southern Culture and advertise the Oxford Conference for the book, which begins tomorrow. There are programs back by the checkout counter. There are a few events tomorrow, and then all day Thursday and Friday, free and open to the public. Some of it up on campus in the Overby Center. The Friday morning is at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in the new parish hall. See lots of Episcopalians in the room. And in the afternoon, it's going to be in the courtroom at the courthouse. So please come and see us. We've got a great array of books. It's one of the most important partnerships we have with Square Books. And so we'll be glad to see you there. But today, we are here to talk about Anne Strand's book, Sacred Altars. So I'm going to tell them the story of us to start. Okay?
Well, please do.
It's on. When you're ready, so don't say anything you don't mean. So I have known Anne Strand for more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. We were part of a group at St. Peter's Episcopal Church called the Spiritual Journeyers. And we met every Sunday for years and years and years. And Anne was our guiding light. When she moved to Selma, we tried to keep going, and we did, but it took 4 or 5 of us to do the work of Anne Strand. And at the end of it, I think we would all say we were still just missing Anne. So if you ever came to one single meeting of the Spiritual Journeyers, raise your hand. And Duncan, you could maybe raise your hand because I think it was you were the priest who said it would be okay for the women to get together in the other room and cook up whatever was going to happen in there.
So grateful. He said the men have their what is that organization called? The Brotherhood.
St. Andrews.
St. Andrews. So the women need to have theirs. And I was very pleased when I heard that.
And boy, we really did. I think I'm not underestimating this when I say, and that was one of the 2 or 3 most important experiences of my spiritual life, was having those classes with us together. So when I was reading your book, I felt like you wrote it for me. Because so much of what we talked about in class has made its way here. And I'm so grateful to you for that, because when I'm trying to call up of what would Anne Strand say, I can go to this book, and there it is. There it is. So thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about how it gets started, the genesis of the book. Because since you first had the idea for a book, lots of things have happened. Talk about talk about the beginning.
Catherine, tell them about me, so I don't.
Oh, okay. So, Mama, it just works for 4 people. Like, it's exhausting. Mama is just amazing. She had already started working on the book, correct? Mm-hmm. And during COVID, and we're all shut down, she was really working on it. And then she had a stroke. And the stroke, I'm getting a little like, the stroke took away all of her articulation. She couldn't speak. And then she worked hard and got it back. And then after a stroke is when she and Neil really worked at publishing this book, which is so hard to publish a book when you have a hard time with articulation. So, anyway, she's just an amazing person who's been through a lot. So, she'll do great today, but if there's a pause, she's on pause. So just give her a break.
When I went to the hospital, it was during COVID. And Catherine put me out at the door. And I went in, I was talking fruit salad. I went in and I went to sleep immediately, or they gave me something. And then when I woke up, I couldn't say my name. I couldn't say any words at all. Gosh. And this book is about connection. So I was not connected at all in the hospital because people came in and I couldn't say my name, so they left immediately. You know, that was, and so, and the doctor would come in and say, "You can say Anne Strand," and I thought, I couldn't say it. And we worked, and Catherine took me home to the Rich Centers because I was afraid I had COVID because I'd been in a place that had COVID. And so I came home and I came to the Bridge Tenders, which we rent that out as a bed and breakfast now, but it was my house earlier. And so she taught me to put the X on the square and to use these books that said tree. Remember?
She wasn't very compliant either.
Well, I'll tell you that when I first got here, she said, "Listen, I may not really go with those questions." But that's amazing, Anne, to think that the language in this book is so beautiful, but the use of language is something that you had access to off and on in the process of completing the book.
I could read. I just couldn't speak.
And you read your book. It's how you read the manuscript as a way to learn how to read again, to speak again.
Well, I did, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's the only thing that interests you. All your secrets.
My English interested me.
Well, now the book is partly about how brains work.
It is.
Right? It's about the left brain and the right brain. Do you want to say something about
I
that?
will.
How does it talk about brain?
Imagine, can you hold that for me? one, you know?
If we need a tech person at the next stage, and I'll have to come out.
So imagine an orange, and I had it peeled, but underneath the bottom, I left rind on the very bottom, and so when I opened it up, you'd see both halves of the brain. And the left side is where it had my damage. I couldn't speak anymore. Tallies, it adds, give me some other words.
Naming things.
Naming
time.
things.
Math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
math.
Music.
And what happens on the right side of the brain, you know.
Creativity.
Creativity. And it also is a direct conduit toward God. Now, if you can get out of monkey mind, if I tell you about monkey mind,
I should do this, I'm doing nothing.
Imagine each one of you, if you were just to get up and walk around the room and just say whatever was on your mind. And it just, you know, I've got to get up tomorrow morning. You have all this verbiage in your head that goes on in your left brain. And in your right brain, you have peace and calmness. Now, let's see. I'm trying to find what I wrote. The left brain is also the source of the ego. And the right brain is the self, the capital S self. Now the ego is the little lowercase self. And the right brain is the larger case self, and it's connected to God and the universe. But we have monkey mind going on all the time. And this monkey mind gets in the way of what's going on here. So Jill Bolt Taylor I'll tell you another story.
I'm going to help with that.
Okay, good. Okay. Jill Bolt Taylor had this stroke, and it was a terrible stroke, and she was incapacitated for 7 or 8 years. All of her brain function went away. And so what she figured out was this brain function that goes in the right side of your brain, once the monkey mind is gone, is let's see if I can find, the neurological circuitry located in our right brain is constantly running and always available for us to hook into at the state of peace and oneness. So that's what she came up with. And I figured that out sort of beforehand, but then after I had my stroke, I didn't really think that anymore. But I had to come back to it later. The ego is a wonderful tool, and the right brain is the driver of the tool. Now, if we put the ego first, the left brain, the left brain, thinks it's the president. And we're convinced over here it's the president too. But it's not the president. It's not the chairman of the board. It's just a little ego that works for the larger self. I'm hoping I'm making sense. Okay. And, but I did want to tell you about how the book became written too. Is that okay?
Yeah, tell us, because, so let's talk about this a little bit. You are a painter of great renown, beautiful works. So why does a painter want to write a book?
Well, I've written a lot of manuscripts that were academic.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about this group you're talking about. Katie asked me to talk about that. How did that group, how did it meet my needs?
The spiritual journeyers.
The spiritual journey group. And over the years, I had many important periods of my life where I was studying. First of all, I said I would never go back to school and listen to anybody else's boring lecture. But at 40, I did go back to school. And I didn't find the lectures boring at that time. But I did have to go to the county college to see if I could still learn. And I'm not sure what I was going to say.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, you went back to, so you've done a lot of academic
Yes,
kind of
I have
writing
done a lot
in
of
your
academic
professional
stuff.
life. So
And
you,
I wanted to take those things and be able to sell them to people. You know, not just say the ego is this and the vocabulary is, you know, all that academic stuff. I was going to try to boil it down into how people could understand.
for real people.
For real people. Well, not just real people, but just people.
So but you always had a right brain and a left brain thing going on then, right?
I did.
Here's the painting that
Yeah.
is coming out of the creativity.
Yes.
And the academic writing that's coming out of that much more rigid chairman of the board
Yes.
sort of thinking.
That's right.
So where does this book land?
It's an integration of the two.
And how about this question though? Why does a painter want to write a book? Because the pictures that are, it's gorgeous. This book has, if you haven't looked at it yet, it has gorgeous plates in it. And we'll get Neil to talk a little bit about how it came
Well,
to.
let's get Neil to talk.
He's not doing anything, is he? So talk to us about how we get to this. You said there are several variations on the book.
Is nature here?
Nature's here, yeah.
Where is she?
Nature, raise your hand, Nature Humphreys. Yeah, right. Nature was the editor and designer. Yeah, she wants you in the front of the room, Nature. Get up here, come on. Nature Humphreys. She spent over a year editing and designing this book. She also is editor for the local Voice, if y'all don't know Nature. So, great job. So, sounds like I'm intermission. That's what it sounds like. So, I'll speak briefly about this and try and relate it somewhat to the book. Anne wanted to publish this book, and in my world of publishing books, the left brain and the right brain are at odds at all times, because we got this book in, and it was beautiful, and it was well written, and it was meaningful. You can read a page anytime you want to, and you'll get something wonderful out of it. And then the left brain kicks in, and I always tell people, I wish the first question I had to ask is this a great book? Unfortunately, the first question you have to ask is, can we make money on this book? And it kicks over to the left brain. So I talked to Anne about all the new technology, and we decided to try and print it digitally the first time. And it was in all black and white. And we published it, and it just didn't work. So that was the first incarnation. And then we said, well, let's try digital printing in color. And we tried that. And it just didn't work. And my right brain said, let me have this. So we combined our resources, and we went to press on a huge press, one of the top book publishers in the South, and produced this book. It's a little more expensive, consequently, but so the left brain does have a little bit to say about this whole ordeal. But it was a lot of fun, and I think this is just one of those times where if you're going to publish this book, you have to do it right. And I think if you look at it, you'll appreciate it, and we're honored to have it in our stable of books, Anne.
Nature, tell me about editing my book.
Come up here for a minute.
Come up here.
Come on.
She likes to be behind the press, not in front.
I'm going to take your seat for a minute.
I was afraid y'all were going to ask me to come up.
We're calling on somebody else next. Sleep out there.
As far as editing the manuscript of the book, there wasn't much to it because it was already so beautifully written, and there wasn't anything to change about it other than to just make sure that the words flowed from one chapter to the next, and from one page to the next, and from one thought to the next, and it was already so close to being what it needed to be. There wasn't much to do for the editing. As far as the design of the book, originally we talked about doing it in paperback with all black and white. Everything was going to be black and white because of the cost of printing it in color. And as we worked together for the months that we did, it just became so apparent that these images needed to be in color. And thankfully, that's how it ended up. Mm-hmm. But I didn't prepare anything to say. So.
She took my book and she helped to transform it.
It was a real gift working on this book, and I kind of almost see it as a meditative manual in some ways. Like in my own personal life, I was going through some things, and I was also unrelatedly beginning to sort of learn a little bit about meditation myself, and so it was a little bit of a coincidence that this landed, that Neil gave me this project about that time, and so I feel like I grew a lot with it, and I learned so much, and if you haven't already read the book, please do, because it's very beautiful.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Anne, could you talk about the connection between the images and the prose, and how the images for you are that visual expression of the prose?
How about handing me the first painting? See if that's the top of it.
I think that's just size.
Does it go this way?
Yeah.
I'll try to read about it. I can't read that.
This is her granddaughter.
That's good. Swinging high, flying way up, higher than real life, I look down and see all the ordinary stuff. The porch, the tool shed, the clothesline, the chinaberry tree. But they are all lit up inside so that their everyday selves have holy sparks in them. And if people could only see those sparks, they'd go and kneel in front of them and pray and just feel good. Somehow the whole world felt like little altars everywhere. Rebecca Wells. So that gave me the image for the book. And I wrote about it. I said, I found this 20th century doll bed quilt made entirely of feed sack folios. I immediately felt delight and thought of experiences of childhood and play. And then the shape gave me an idea of a child's swing, and playful screamers came into mind. Strangely, the tiny dots at the bottom, can you show those little dots between
That's
the things?
between the,
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
I played between the yo-yos. I paired with the painting with one of my favorite quotations. But as I looked more closely, they seemed to echo little altars everywhere and the holy sparks of childhood. So the writing, it just sort of came to me. And this is let me read something else. I'll talk about spiritual expression. A mystic is sometimes defined as a person who finds by contemplation and self-surrender a sense of unity with the absolute, or the one who experiences a truth found beyond the senses. So when I call myself a mystical spiritualist, it implies that my work reflects and expresses a unity and a connection of things as one, attempting to access fields beyond the intellect and the physical senses alone. Well, that's a very peculiar way of saying it. It just means that I try to look beyond the reality and paint what comes from inside, and then I try to write about it because it's important to me, so you all will understand it. Did I answer?
Yes, thank you.
Can we talk about the title a little bit? Sacred Altars, Artful Journey to Enchantment. And the words sacred altars spring up in the book quite often. I mean, I agree with Neil. You could open this book up to any page, really, and take a little something and find something that you need. But that idea of sacred altars, that springs up with some regularity. What are you thinking about there? What's a sacred altar?
Well, I actually have a Chinaberry tree in my backyard. So when I was swing up high, I would see the Chinaberry tree, and I remember climbing in it. And it just it was sacred altars. It just reminded me of the things beyond what we see. And I talk about them all the way through the book. And actually talk about meditation as a way of reaching those areas.
That was not always the title of the book, though, was it?
I don't know. What
Well, let's find out from Neil.
Well, we have lots of authors who have first titles and their first drafts. Do y'all know Ken Sufka's book, The A Game, 9 Steps to Better Grades?
Yes.
The original title was Don't Shoot Your Mama. There are all sorts of, you go through this process of narrowing it down. But Anne, do you remember it started
No, I
with?
don't remember it.
The first manuscript we got was Pocketfuls of Mindfulness. Yeah, I think Sacred Altars is better, don't y'all? Oh, and on that note, you were talking about your painting, and I wanted to ask one question about Alan, your husband of 60 plus years. 61 years. You all knew Alan, and Alan was rather left-brained, wasn't he?
Very.
Yes. And so I remember a conversation that I heard. So Alan, in his, headmasterly way, Anne went down after studying for decades and whipped out a painting in about 2.5 hours that later sold for thousands and thousands of dollars. And he called you on that. And do you remember what you told him?
I can't remember what I told him.
Oh, I'll never forget it. He was questioning whether that was the right thing to do, you selling this piece of art that took you so little time in the actual moment that you wanted. And I think your response, Alan was a big tennis fan, was, should Pete Sampras get $3 million for that overhead from last week?
I said, how long did it take a Rod Laker to learn to do a backhand?
That's right. Something along those lines.
Classic Anne Strand. Should we see if maybe other people have some questions?
Yes.
Are you amenable to
I'll
questions?
try to answer them. Jamie.
And I would love for you to share with people the journey, because when I read your book, I thought, oh, Anne's inviting me on a journey.
Well, my book is about that. So let me start at the very beginning.
Is this when you're a little girl? Good.
This is a title page and it has all the different.
I like that all the sections ends with ing. It's becoming. Everything is
Everything's becoming. Yes. You see, it is becoming because that pen is in the process of drawing the illustrations. Is there something between there? I think there must be.
It's that good thick paper we print on.
High quality.
Beautiful paper.
Here, there it is, right?
Okay. This is the beginning of my career. Once upon a time, there was a little girl with a little crayon right in the palm of her hand. And when she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she drew all over the wall. And when she was 5, she painted the porch steps pink with oil-based paint that she had mixed from the cans of red and white that the house painter had left open in the backyard. But luckily, instead of being spoilt for her actions, her parents loved her creativity and encouraged it, just as she will love and encourage yours, as she invites you to enhance or reconnect to your own innate creative spirit within these pages and beyond. So it's an invitation to everybody. And let me say that art is not the only way you can get there. Just think about it. What are the spiritual journey? What are the important things in your life that have carried you along? Go inside and just try to figure that out. And it's not art. You can start with anything. If you're a writer, you're a writer. If you cook, beautifully cook, that's a way. If you're a gardener, if anything you can get in the zone with, running, that could take you somewhere. So each one of the things that you do could take you on a spiritual journey. Art was just my way. So I want you to be clear about that before you read the book. This book is for all who want to feel aware and alive within, whether they are religious or not. For those on the human journey who want to feel connected to themselves, to others, and to the universe. Although I have used language that will be familiar to some but not others, it describes states of being found across many faiths and cultures. The routes we take on our own particular journeys are personal, but the experiences are universal. It is to welcoming these universal experiences that this work is dedicated. Okay, a problem arises when we become socialized. We often lose our connection to the sacred wonder of the world. Not only do we lose our connection to the holy energy outside of ourselves, but also we become unplugged from the same energy inside. And our home, our authentic voice and essence of who we were in the first place gets hidden. As I look back and I realized what delighted me then, I had I can't remember her name. She's the first person that taught me to pay attention to my feelings. Donna Pickens. And I was her first art teacher. And she went on and got a master's degree, and she worked at the museum in Montgomery. And when she told me this story, I couldn't believe it. It was such a gift to me. When I taught art, I didn't teach people how to do it my way. I taught them to do it their way. And so I had a bunch of artists, and some of them were getters. And they made art. And they even began an art studio, not an art gallery. It lasted 7 years. And that's pretty long for an art gallery. And they just did it on their own ability and creativity. And so when I heard that story, I thought, oh my gosh. And so I thought, as I look back, I realized what delighted me then, and seems always to have been my calling, was guiding myself and others in finding and nurturing the fragile connection so easily lost of staying with or becoming reconnected to our own unique selves, to others, and the sacred energy of the universe. So connection is why we are here. It gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Brene Brown. So you want to ask me some more questions?
So you see what I mean about 5 minutes with Anne Strand. You get something that you might be thinking about for a long, long time. We will probably not take too much more time. We'll see if people have maybe another question or two. Do you? Does someone have a question?
One of the questions that you had asked was, we know what we got out of the class, those of us that were there for all those many, many years. And so what did you get out of the class?
What I got out of the class was, first of all, I taught the class for a while. Yeah. And then I had other people teach it. And then all of a sudden I realized, why not teach people to have their own authentic voice? And so that's what happened. Each person took, you didn't have to take a class, but you could. And I remember, Katie, one time you brought all the clocks in your house.
I remember that too.
Well, because there was an altar, right? So we had an altar in the middle of the room. So there's the sacred altars, and you had to bring something for the altar, and I brought the clock.
That's right. And I remember what you said.
You don't remember
I
what
do remember
You do?
what you said. Yes. And you said, John follows this clock.
I've taken it off the wall and brought it to church. What's he gonna do now?
I do want to mention one more thing before I close. Oh, let me to hold that other painting up. Okay.
This one?
Yeah, this is the core energy. Love is the core energy that rules everything. Love is the one ingredient that holds us all together. John E. Fetzer. And that's love energy in our brain that goes on and on and on. If we can shut off this part of our brain in order to hear it, and we can do that with meditation.
Did the quote come first, then the painting, or the painting and you found the quote?
The quote, I did the painting and the quote came second.
Oh, interesting.
And then I wrote this: scientists tell us that we're made up of the same substances as the stars. I like that. Songwriters tell us that love makes the world go round. I like that too. The stitches on this single quilt square tell me that we are held together in a beautiful design with perfect skill and patience, each different and each unique and each loved and wanted and made of stars shining all together in the starry night. Not about that. Okay. All right, well, let's hold the wound. I'll just show that to people. That's right. One evening I stayed awake with a problem and painted far into the night. I struggled with the image on the canvas. Not knowing where to go, I continued when suddenly breast appeared behind the wound, with the faint feeling of a heart inside. I really did not know what it meant at the time, but later I learned about the wounded healer. The story of the wounded healer, and you can go back and think of your life. How did it start? What wounds did you have early in life? Think about it. The wounded healer holds a special place for me. Over time, the Spirit can secretly heal our deepest wounds as we grow into adulthood, a kind of soul retrieval. Our earliest wound, perhaps we've received it, is perceived as victimhood, but much later it changes its form and reveals its significance. So that's what happens in the spiritual journey. I hope that I don't think I'm doing well on this.
You're doing great. Amazing.
But I just wanted everybody to know, if you can think back on your own wounds and how they've changed over the years. And do you feel victimized from the childhood wound? But perhaps not. And if you don't feel that way, then that's a good step. And I also want to talk about the cross. Let me show you. Here is the horizon. And that's what happens. We go across, that's what time is. We move across our lives, and that's our history. Here, something happens and something breaks through from another area. from the sacred area. I bet you can think back on your times and think, when have things broken through to me? When have things broken through to me? When have I, all of a sudden, I got it. And all of a sudden, I got it. But they don't last long. They don't last long. So that's my story. All right.
Well, you have been, I'm so glad that you read to us some from the book.
Okay.
I'm really glad to hear these ideas in your words and in your voice. I miss you, Anne Strand.
Oh, I miss you.
So I'm gonna read one thing I'm gonna read one thing. I picked out an Anne Strand passage. It's just a couple of lines, but we can end here, and then you'll sign a few more books, will you?
Yes, I will.
All right.
Yes, I will.
We sold some right here, I think. This is, we got our left brain, right brain balanced.
Get the future of the publishing industry here.
So here it is, and it uses the title. For when we are made one with everything, sacred altars spring up everywhere, and we are not alone anymore. Nobody can be lost. We are at home already. Thank you.
Sure.